you're here today, joining us from Germany.
Okay, so you have to leave at 5, so let's make it count and kick it off already. Today we're gonna talk about how not to F up your US expansion and expansion in general. And I think we're gonna be a small crowd. We have one attendee joining here as well, so if someone can help me moderate it in the background, that would help. And today you're gonna have the pleasure to talk with my colleague Cassandra and myself, but maybe before that, I give the word to Alexander and we kick it off.
Yeah, thank you. Really having also a small group here shows really commitment for international expansion. I also see some familiar faces here. I'm Alexander from Berlin Finance Initiative. It's actually an initiative for Berlin fintechs expanding to the US market. And today, yeah, we have limited time. I just want to pass along the word again to Gernot, and we want to know a little bit more about your background, your experiences in several projects, and also at the end of this webinar, we are going to offer you also like a spot in a workshop which is coming up for fintechs expanding to the US market. But wait for that at the end of the webinar, and yeah, thanks for joining in.
Cool. And Helge, I see you raised your hand. Was that by accident, or do you need any assistance, or already want to share something? The hand comes up still. How can we help?
That must have been by accident.
Okay, good to have you in the call, Helge, and let's jump in. What you could do is please change your name to your name, and I see that with everyone, but also can you add your company, because that helps us to facilitate in a better way, if that's possible. So you can do this with the 3 little dots. And yeah, I think we're gonna jump in, and we already did. Who's in the house? Where are you from? So international crowd, both sides of the Atlantic. And today we're gonna tell you how to bridge the second valley of death, as we call it, and scale successfully into new markets. The first valley of death is always finding product market fit in your home market, but then actually a far bigger pitfall lies ahead, and this is scaling into new markets, be it the US or be it somewhere in Europe or Asia. This is where we see a lot of companies struggle with. And I can tell you firsthand, I've been there, I've seen it, I've done it. So I was part of a company where we scaled into 17 markets at the same time. We scaled very rapidly from 100 to 750 people in 1 year. And yeah, this was hell of a ride, but we made a lot of mistakes actually in doing so. And we kind of stumbled into that second valley of death and had to close half of the markets later. We had to, unfortunately, let go of 300 people from one day to the other. We couldn't close a follow-on round and had burned 20 million in the process. So this was kind of the beginning of the end, unfortunately, of that company. And why am I telling you that story? Because it provoked weGrow International. Me and my co-founder, French co-founder, we decided to share the learnings so that other founders don't have to do and repeat them, and can scale their companies more successfully and more sustainable, actually, in the end. Our BHAG is we want to impact 100,001 founders in their international growth. And we do this via market expansion strategy, hands-on advisory. We work with the companies for the execution then also, and rolling out in new markets, and also help them with recruiting the right people in those markets and finding capital or helping on M&As. So this is a little bit about us. We helped 300 companies or a little bit more in the past years, and happy to share the learnings today or scratch on the surface of some of them. I'm not going to bore you with all the companies we worked with, because I'm going to pull out some examples. But in fintech, we worked with some players from the Dutch market or other areas. We just helped the big French fintech expand internationally, and we also work with US companies going to Europe or European companies going to the US. And today it's about the do's and don'ts of expanding to the US, but a lot of principles you can also take and use for European expansion, but we're gonna focus in on the US expansion primarily. What are the big things and the most common mistakes? what we see is, and this is very often, timing is off. So you have aspirational market like the US, everyone wants to go there and be successful. It's kind of the holy land of startup expansion, especially for European founders, but a lot of companies are too early. But the same goes also, you can be too late and there's already a big competitor there, and then it's really hard to go there. Lack of certainty, not really knowing how to go into those markets. And the third one would be relying too much on your gut feeling. And we're going to talk about that too. So what kind of research can you do to mitigate that and really make the right choices where to go, and also where to go in the US, by the way. And as I mentioned, a mismatch between ambition and resources. So big aspiration, but not having the funding on board, not having the right people yet on board. And maybe you have to start with baby steps versus taking the big leap. That could also be a decision. Huge topic about planning. So some companies forget to plan. They jump the gun, jump into a new market and say, hey, this is it, let's go there. And then actually they don't look after the home market well enough, versus over planning, right? Taking too much time and too much planning and not get going. And that also plays into the timing. And one of the two last ones is underestimating the management time. So it takes a lot of time, and we're going to talk about that briefly, doing this. So this is nothing that you do on a Friday afternoon. This is almost a full-time job, and it requires a lot of management attention if you want to do it right, because complexity is just going to triple or quadruple when doing that. And my most favorite one, and this is always exciting, is overlooking cultural nuances. And maybe Cassandra, you can share something there as a someone that is actually from the United States and now working in Europe.
Yeah, thanks, Gernot. I mean, I think this is a pretty big one, and we're going to talk about it more later, but I think it's really easy to feel as though you know the American market, or you know Americans well because we consume so much American media. But you know, just as in any market, the stereotypes that you might feel are familiar are not necessarily the ones that are true. I also find that coming from the US, my communication style is very different from my European peers. So Gernot and I sometimes have to double check, like, what did you mean by this? Is there a nuance that I'm missing? You know, am I needing to read between the lines? What does this decision-making process look like? All these things that you might take for granted when you're speaking to somebody from your own country, obviously keep in mind, and then doubly keep in mind because Americans have pretty thin skins, actually. So
good to know. So this is just a quick teaser, and now we're going to look into the first do or don't. And it's actually make sure that you're ready. And I really want to emphasize that a lot, because we see a lot of companies just jumping the gun and start running. And then in the middle of the process, realizing, okay, actually, we're not ready. So sometimes we hear stories, or founders come to us and say, yeah, we have early product market fit in our home market. Now we've got around 10 to 20,000 euros that we can spend on market expansion, and we want to go to Germany with that budget, or we want to conquer the US market. Then our answer is, please don't. Really, that doesn't make sense. You're far too early for that. Then focus on your home market and grow there, because otherwise this is money that you will lose immediately. Management attention will go otherwhere, and that might actually jeopardize your home market a lot. But the other way around, also, waiting too long can jeopardize your international growth a lot. We see this often with German companies, to be frank. They wait too long. Why? Because their home market is simply bigger than a Dutch company or a Danish company. So they wait too long, and then competitors are already there, or their organization is not built up internationally, and then they have to basically bring in people that are international and can help them with that. So you have both things. It's just a matter of timing, and this is a food for thought. If you bring that to the US market, well, are you ready, as we call it, for the big beast, or as some other founder once said that? Cassandra, can you share some thoughts on that?
yeah, I think some things that feel really basic but can get lost in this sort of moment of making a decision, knowing if you're ready versus waiting too long, or just thinking ahead to what the complications of working in a sort of transatlantic situation will look like. You know, what happens if your manager on duty is located in Berlin and there's a crisis in the US, or vice versa? Who gets to make a decision based on what time of day it is, you know? What is the legal incorporation going to look like? Are you going to settle in Delaware because you don't have to pay taxes? Are you going to think of something else? What's your supply chain going to look like? You know, this is crucial. We've been having big issues in the US, also here. So, you know, are you going to rely on your European suppliers? You don't have a supply chain, you know, because you're fintech, that's great. But it can still be a concern for potentially your customers. So you want to think about it in that context as well. And then, you know, customer service, again, an obvious one, but Americans like to hear American voices on the phone. Outsourcing is a very sensitive subject for many companies. So these are just sort of things that you can consider when you're looking at your own readiness. Is, have you thought these through? And it doesn't all need to be complete in advance, but it is good to consider before, you know, you're all the way there.
And to add two more, are you ready to move as a founder? Because that's very often required, or to spend a lot of time in the US market. And especially in these times, do you have enough runway to afford that, or do you have funding coming up? Then that's also crucial to understand your funding and runway situation. Well, next one is the do is research on your next market, and this goes for the US, but also where in the US should you launch? I think this is crucial, versus assume that things will be the same as in your home market, because I can tell you one thing, that's never going to be the case. So even if you research it later, you will think, okay, I have never thought about that. So the more you go in, the more things you will find. And it all starts with defining what is your product market fit. So when we approach that, that's what we look at. Why are you successful in the market or the markets that you launched already? So understand really the customer pain points. What kind of pain point does your product solve? And what challenges do your customers have? And they might be different in the US versus in European markets. So it's good to understand that, and then look for the same ingredients and the same conditions in the market to have an early indication. This is where we should settle. This is where we should go. Those are maybe partners in the market that we also find in the US or in certain states in the US. And that gives you an indication where you can start and where you can launch. Cassandra.
Yeah, and just going back to this idea of doing research on the next market, I'm sure many of you know this, but in the US, the average American has 3 credit cards. This is actually true for me. And then in Germany, it's cash only. Well, not cash only, but 79% according to our research. So I think what's interesting to think about is, what is the behavior of the consumers in the place that you're going? Do they need your service? How are they going to use it? Are they going to use it differently than your home market customers? And this might also be a question of, you know, if you're B2B and you're working with, you know, industrial manufacturing companies, maybe you need to think about, okay, where in the US am I going to go? Where does that make the most sense? And the obvious solution might not be the right one. Like, oh, I'm going to go to the Midwest because that's where a lot of manufacturing is. In fact, in Florida, it's one of the biggest manufacturing states in the country. So understanding, you know, your customers, how they're different from Germany and the US, and then also regionally, what is going to make the biggest impact in terms of your selection.
And the next one would be, who is actually leading the expansion, right? So as I mentioned before, it will require a lot of management time from you. So I think it's important that you have your house in order, and that you also have enough people on board, and maybe a strong COO or someone who is leading the operations in your home markets, while you as an entrepreneurial founder can focus on launching the next market, be it the US or other markets. So it will take quite some time and resources from you. What we see that helps a lot is having a strong head of expansion or someone that can help you with that and support you internally in getting actually the stuff done. versus just do it by yourself. I think this will be overwhelming in the end, and then you're not productive and effective in anything, and you will feel this in your organization and see it in the results, I think. So this is the question we sometimes, or like, let's make it a bit more radical. It's not the job, and without any judgment, of an intern to lead the expansion. You need to make strategic decisions. So it's going to be someone in your leadership team, if not even you as a CEO or one of the founders. I think that's important to understand. Next one, Cassandra.
Again, this may seem very obvious, but one of the things that we really drive home about US expansion is asking the people on the ground. We can help with this expansion, and we certainly will, but it's also worth discussing with people who are familiar with the industry, familiar with the region, and can give you those nuances that would otherwise be missed. So in this case, don't be a worker bee drone, but keep pushing and asking the right questions. And with this, if you can go to the next slide, Gernot, this sort of feeds into this idea of what are the stereotypes of American culture, and how much media do you consume. At my high school, we did not have organized dances and songs that everybody sang together. In fact, the cafeteria looked a lot more like this, except even sadder. So I think it's important to have an expert on the ground who can say to you, well, it might look like that from the outside, but this is the situation on the ground.
So who are those experts?
Yeah, so great question. It's my network, it's your network, Gernot. It's Alexander's network in Berlin, finance initiative. These are all people who can help connect you to the right experts. But then it's also interesting to talk to people on the street. This is why research into new markets is costly, because the best thing that you can do is go there and ask a potential customer or ask a potential partner, does this work? Does this fit into your needs? Or is this something that you would use differently than the way that my customers do at home? And then the other place where you can find experts is in local business development offices. So this can be in the US, the Chamber of Commerce. There are also a lot of European cities that have sister city initiatives in the US and can make connections for you. A really interesting way to go about it if you want to research a particular city. So think creatively about which experts you can reach and where to reach them. And if you're not sure where they are in the US, there are plenty of people, including myself, who can point you in the right direction.
Exactly. Thanks for sharing that. And now one of my favorite topics, what I said about planning. We always say there are it's the 3 Ps. So prepare, 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 but you could also say plan, 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 right? So it doesn't make sense to overplan things. So don't do that, but have a clear structure on planning. And I'm going to show you a template, what you can use, but make it agile, iterate. So every week, every month that you're going to spend on the new market, you will find new things. And it's important to build the plan so that you can change it and build the new learnings in and then execute on it. Something that we find useful is also understanding what type of company you are, and especially when going to the US, then that shapes how you go there. So this is a nice resources from Index Ventures, by the way. So they came up with 4 typical archetypes for the expansion. One is the compass. So built in Europe and sold in the US. And that also means that the CEO at some point needs to really relocate to the US, but your whole engineering team will still be in Europe. So it might be even cheaper and more economic to then keep developing in Europe, but the commercial operations will be then focused on the US. And that also means you as a leader will be there, will be heading a commercial team, and probably your operational team will be bigger in the US at some point, and development capacities are then in Europe. The other one is the anchor that I like a lot. It's basically for companies where the US represents a sizable market, but it's not the only market that you will be there. So this has different challenges. And another one is the pendulum. So this is where you basically not really sure, are you ready there yet, but you will make steps into the US market. And as you grow, then you grow in there, and you have to pay attention where you put your management attention. So you have European operations, but then also US operations. So that's why it's called pendulum. You swing back and forth. And the fourth one is the telescope. So it's a classic easy sign-on SaaS solution. You can have the first leads in the US. It's an easy onboarding process. You don't need to be there. Potentially, you don't even need sales reps on the ground to have the first traction. And this will, as it grows, then later turn into different models. But this can also be, depending on your business model, fit your expansion needs. So it's good to think that through. Where do you fall in which category? Because it will have different implications. Here is the plan. So this is a rough structure of an expansion canvas, and then you need to tweak it to your considerations and your needs. Basically, insights and expansion goals on the left side. So how is the market structured, product market fit, competition, culture, but also the stakeholders that you need to inform, investors, your family, your team members, and what kind of resources do you have on board and what limits you? And this is often catered to people, and also the funding, or maybe the tech stack, or some bank connections, etc. Right? So it helps to structure that out, write it down, and that then, and on top you see the process, will boil down into a strategy where you write it out into what's the value proposition for the US market, product pricing, can you charge more there, or do you have to adjust your product? What are your sales channels, distribution partners, and how will be the big operational setup that it all sits upon? And a lot of legal and regulatory questions will also come up there. And I know we have Peter Meyer in the call, who is advising a lot of companies for the legal setup in the US, just as a side note, if you have any questions then. And this all goes down then into a proper planning with timelines, milestones, KPIs, a clear budget for the US expansion. We're going to talk about that in a second, etc. Action list ownership. So if you want to have that, let us know, and we can talk you through in a more detailed manner. All that helps de-risk your market expansion, what we told you so far. So you see here the risk from low to high on the left side, and the investment needs on the bottom axis. So first, test and research the market, and later then scale it and fully commercialize it. This is how the risk curve goes down. In parallel, your success curve will go up. So this is just a principle to have top of mind. Yeah, this is almost one of the last ones, but set a clear budget and KPIs, and don't underestimate the time and money that you will need for it. There's a rule of thumb. Usually it's twice the money and twice the time that you will need for expanding to a new market. But for the US, we see as a reality, it's 3x or maybe even more. So plan with buffers, plan with extra budget. Don't think that the budget or the funding that you have already on board might be enough. So it's good to also think about your fundraising. When do you need to fundraise? Because otherwise you might run out of money, and a couple of 100K or even a couple of millions are pretty fast gone in the US if you really want to take it serious. And now, last point, culture. Cassandra, you want to take that?
Sure, yeah. You know, in the US, the customer base is so broad and diverse that you want to make sure that you have a multicultural team that can help you address those different perspectives. I think it's again, I've said this, so I don't want to repeat myself too much, but it is very easy to overlook the cultural nuance in the US. You know, you've got the West Coast and the East Coast, and they have a lot of similarities, but there's also the middle and the South, and each region really does have its own identity and its own preferences and habits. Some really key cultural points from my perspective when thinking about expanding to the US are, if you could go to the next slide, thanks. At will employment. So why do I have this under culture? It's actually because it also in fact affects the attitude that future team members in the US will have about your company. there isn't nearly the security that you get in Europe, where it's like, well, I've got a permanent contract. Like, great, I'm a member of this team until, you know, we mutually decide otherwise. At will employment means that somebody can leave in 2 weeks, and you can decide that they can leave with 2 weeks notice or no notice, depending on what the employment laws are per state. And I think that that really affects how people feel in terms of whether or not they're part of the team, or if you're trying to construct a family, or, you know, how are you going to ensure that your team members in the US are as excited to be working for you as you are to have them. Diversity matters. I said this already, so I'm not going to go over it again. But then I think the other thing that's really important is, you know, what do Americans think about where you're coming from? So if you're a German company coming to the US, they're going to have some stereotypes in their mind. They're going to think, you know, that you're, you know, what are the obvious ones? That you're always on time, that you're very precise, that your finances are in order, which I guess is a good stereotype if you're a fintech coming to the US. So how can you leverage that to your advantage? How can you play on that as a sort of European seal of quality, which is another stereotype that we have? So just something to keep in mind. Thanks, Gernot.
Yeah, and I think we can take, especially about cultural differences, this is one of the most interesting points, and we can take a lot of time on it later on in another webinar. But here's just to sum it up: know your product market fit and why are you successful, and how can you transfer that to the US or other markets, and choose the next market wisely. And that also goes to, again, where in the US will you launch, and what is then your land and expand plan that can make a huge difference and can set you back a lot of months or even years if you choose the wrong location or the wrong hub to launch your business. Strategy: have one and be agile in it. So this is the bottom line here. 3x time and budget. I think we mentioned that. Cultural differences, clear. And this is one of the, be aware of that. And obviously, don't repeat the mistakes that others have done before, and seek out experts and people that are experienced with that topic. There are so many all over the US, in Europe, and people who have done it. It's just a matter of finding them and then tapping into their wisdom and their learnings, so you don't have to repeat it. So those are the 6 big learnings. And here is a quick outlook for what we're going to do. Alexander, you want to talk us more or tell us more about what's on the roadmap for the next touch points?
Yeah, yes, I cannot share my video anymore, but yeah, thank you so much, Gernot. Cassandra, was super fruitful, and luckily we having you, your expertise and your team with us for an upcoming free online workshop for hours. So if you're thinking of like really expanding to the market and you don't know if you're ready yet, I think that's a great opportunity, a really valuable opportunity to understand the market, understand your product, understand your business model, and to see if you are really ready for the market. So if you want to join this workshop on December 8th, there are a few spots left, and we're happy to have you there in this workshop with weGrow to get more into US expansion.
Great. We're looking forward to that. And Alexander, thank you for involving us in that and having us on board. This is really fun. So we're looking forward to the December 8th for that workshop. And I think with that, maybe a quick word on that one.
Yeah, just a quick one. So the Berlin Finance Initiative USA is the initiative arm, US arm from Berlin Finance Initiative in Berlin. So we're connecting those ecosystems, Berlin, with the US market. We have an upcoming key event where we bring over DeFi fintech experts to Miami on December 15th. So if you're being in Miami or you want to join in, we're going to offer a live stream. It's going to be a really vivid, dynamic conversation on the recent crisis in the crypto FTX market collapse. So we want to also have a perspective, European perspective on this topic. So if you're all interested on those topics and the upcoming activities in the US or in Berlin, please join our fintech leaders. So this is, I think, the best way to stay connected with us and to be informed of all things we're going to do in the next month.
Sounds super exciting. Thanks, Alexander, for sharing that. And with that, we actually move to the Q&A. Are there any questions from the people in the call?
If there are none, I just jump in because I'm really happy that you talked about the MVM, not the MVP, but the MVM, minimum viable market. When I talk to founders, fintechs from Berlin, I always hear like you have to go all in. I don't know what it means, all in, but they always tell everyone like you have to be all in for US market. So now I'm really happy that you introduced like the step-by-step or this like testing out. And I'm more like also on the side, like you could test out the waters. You can have kind of a concept first in the market to see if your product or your business is ready for the US market.
Yeah.
Do you have like an example? Because between all in and testing concept, there's, a lot of things we can discuss. So what is your take on that?
Well, I think mentally you have to be all in anyways as a founder for the ride, right? But that doesn't mean that you need to take reckless risks or things that could jeopardize your company. So I understand a bit what all in mentality means, but I think it's wise to de-risk it. I mean, any big company, any corporate, before they launch big advertising companies and spend millions on media budget, they test the campaigns, right? And then they go for the ones that has the biggest resonance and the best conversion. And the same principle goes for product launches. The same goes for market launches. I'll give you a real life example for a company we worked a while ago, not in the fintech space, but the same principle applies. They were really hung up on one of the European markets and brought us in and said, like, we want to go there. Can you help? And our question was, why? Why do you want to go to that market? Are you sure? Yeah, sure. Strategic interest, whatever, investor pressure. And we said, give us 6 weeks. We're going to pressure test the market together with you. And then we look at the output because we're highly skeptical if this is the right market. We did. And the result was, don't go there as tier 1 market. Maybe tier 2 or 3, but it's a high effort, low yield market. It takes a lot of investment to get that one running, strong competition on the ground already, highly regulatory complex. So why would you go there first just because it was a neighboring market, right? So it seemed to be an easy walk in the park choice. And with that, then we analyzed 20 European cities because they launched city by city and filtered the ones that are right and tested those as well. I think that approach saved them at least 2 to 3 million because that was the budget they had reserved for launching that one market, and we could deploy it better in other markets. And they were a bit surprised when we came back with the results, but we took them along in that journey so they could learn and see and what it really meant. And in the end, we opened a bottle of champagne and said, okay, cool, 2 million saved, and now let's do it right. So I think it's important to do those steps and then go all in with more confidence.
Definitely agree. Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah. Well, if there are any other questions, now is the time. We're here for you. And if not, then happy to take that conversation online or follow up on a call or just ping us via email. We're here for you. Connect on LinkedIn. And for the rest, I think we can conclude right here, right now. I hope we had some impact on you for your expansion ideas and plans. And if you have any candidates that would like to join on the 8th of December for our webinar, please let us know, because then we can sign them up as well. So thanks everyone, and wishing you a happy Thanksgiving. If you're in the US or if you're in Europe, then probably a good rest of the evening or start of the evening. Bye-bye.
Great. Thank you so much.